I didn't trust my mother with my reason for taking such a course. I simply told her I was interested in it. Nothing more. Hello, I am GD, your host and writer for Out of Context. This is my third channel update and is intended to cover who I am. It's a long story, so let's continue. It would take 2 moves to move into this new house of ours. Again, this was a fixer-upper. The house was more livable than the previous one, at least initially. No allergy issues. Although most of my allergy issues seemed to disappear during my time at the previous house. It seemed to happen during a 1.5-year period in which my diet was completely vegan. It was mostly a survival challenge, but my allergies to dust and such seemed to completely disappear during that time. My breathing and weight seemed to change as well. But this house was isolated. No joke. Any neighbors of ours were either a kilometer or more distance from us. We were located within a valley, overlooked by a large cliffside hill. It was open fields, surrounded by forests on 3 sides and a large pond on the other. And the night sky. What an incredible showcase of a starry night sky. It was pretty, I can assure you of that. But no internet. And this would be a problem for people taking our particular courses. We were assured by my mother's husband that during the 2 to 3 years of our academic studies, we would not be disturbed with any work. Go to school, eat home-cooked meals, study, sleep, with no other expectations. Not a bad deal, but the commute and lack of access to the college's intra-network would make things hard for us. We managed, for a time, but eventually found a place to rent in town, close to the college. My mother and her husband didn't think this was a good idea. But the lack of internet was not something either my brother or myself could tolerate given its necessity to study outside of classes. Besides that, studying late and then driving back home late when tired, especially with lots of animals on the roads, not a good combination. Now, about the classes. My brother and I had very similar classes with very similar schedules for our first year. Programmers need some knowledge of technical networking and such, and networkers need some knowledge of scripts and programming. During our first year, we met another student taking the computer programming course. He and my brother became friends, and all 3 of us would socialize over various games in our spare time. Additionally, he was renting rooms out of his house, and we eventually took residence there while we were going to college. Now, classes were pretty straightforward. Lots of textbooks, lots of reading, practical exercises in knowledge known as labs, and tests. I thought the reading would be simple, and it was at first. Technical networking is very complex, and so is social networking in humans. I had some comprehension of social networking at this time, so I attempted to use it as a tool to help memorize the vast information regarding technical networking. I was a slow reader, and my ability to comprehend and memorize the information I read was inconsistent. It seemed different for other people in my classes. They seemed driven to learn and unfettered by the workload. Honestly, even if I had an interest in computer networking, which I did, I was going to school only to escape my family. Slowly but surely, I fell behind in my reading. In turn, I missed my labs and did poorly on tests. But it didn't become obvious that I was failing until the second year of my course. By this time, I had done my landlord friend a favor. I moved out of my bigger room and into a storage room with a sofa bed. The rent was cheaper and allowed my friend to rent my previous room. It was comfortable enough, I figured. The second year started fine, but my failures in the first year were starting to have an effect on me. Some labs from the first year were necessary to complete second-year labs. But I was still behind in my reading, so I was clueless about some of the concepts. I tried guessing what they could mean, given some of the similarities between technical and social networking, but it could only go so far. I tried to relieve the stress I was feeling by freeing up time for myself to do things other than study, but this started to reduce how much sleep I was getting. I started arriving late to my classes. It was happening more and more often. Eventually, arriving late to class transitioned into missing class. At first it was just one class, then it was multiple classes. Finally, I stopped going to classes altogether. It was clear that I wasn't ready for college. After all, I was still only 10 years old, psychologically speaking. Being in that room was pointless, since I wasn't going to my classes anymore. But I didn't want to go home. I never wanted to go to college, but I still felt like this was all my fault. I remained in that room for the rest of my second year of courses, afraid of what was to come. My college diploma was suspended. It seemed as though, despite failing, I just barely passed. But I would need to finish some of the labs to completely release my diploma. I didn't want it. I didn't want any of it. I returned home to my mother with nothing to show for my studying. I was depressed, and I had given up on trying to hide it. I did work around the house as I was asked, but I was defiantly antisocial. I skipped meals and slept. My mother's husband challenged me and my attitude. When he didn't understand, when I told him none of it mattered, he thought I was being a selfish brat, got angry, and shouted at me. Now, unlike my father, my mother's husband never physically disciplined me. My father's voice scared me, but my mother's husband had a much more imposing voice. I was very vocally reserved, but when he yelled, it was complete sensory overload. He made me want to scream out in terror, and, to my embarrassment and disgust, he made me do it. Once. That was the end of our relationship. Whether he was evil or not, I hated him. No one was allowed to break my silence, and he violated me the moment he tried. Even if it wasn't intentional, the actions he took were, and that was enough for me to socially condemn him as an evil being. I went to visit my father, to escape my mother's and her husband's presence, but I would eventually have to go back. That's what I thought. But I didn't want to. So I told her that I wasn't coming back. I was relieved when she made peace with my decision, but our relationship would only get so much more complicated. My father's seasonal work was about to begin. Generally, I would work for my father whenever possible, so I would have funds for the rest of the year. I wouldn't say I was a good worker, but in the past, I was still a child. I would perform simple tasks and then play in the back of the property. Things were different now. I was an adult, in body at least. But I had little motivation to do well or make money. My father tried to push me into being exceptionally productive, always seeming unsatisfied, like I could have done better. But I couldn't do better, not with this rotting disposition of mine. I never had the opportunity to truly evaluate myself, what I wanted, and where I was going. No, not even that. How about what the hell was causing my psychology to be so fragile to controversy? I didn't understand, and I was continually being forced into more controversy. Having a sound and common-sensual state of mind being demanded of me. I was not in a position to provide those things as an individual. And I found it infuriating that people couldn't see that I was in a psychologically immature and crippled state. By this time, I had grown tired of hiding how I felt. But I didn't know how to explain it, because I didn't entirely know what the problem was. I hoped that it was obvious, so that someone could recognize the problem and explain it. No luck. I took a break from working, and decided I was going to visit the place where I lived during my time in high school. More specifically, I was going to visit the town where my high school resided. I hoped that, maybe, returning to a place where I had begun to feel some stability, maybe I could heal from this psychological disaster. Now, this wouldn't be the same as if I stayed there after high school and avoided going to college, but I didn't know what else to do. I managed to contact some of my acquaintanceships via social media and found someone who could accommodate my 1-week stay. I was hopeful. My first day there, nothing substantial, but nothing bad. I met with a few people, and we hung out. Not a bad start. But the longer I stayed, and the more contact I made, it was clear that these were not the same people I once knew. They had changed, matured. They were living their lives, working, and having fun. They were nothing like me. I had been trapped by my psychology and emotions for my entire life, and it was only by the end of high school that I felt like I had the opportunity to escape my past and learn to live properly. But I was whisked off to college, delaying my growth even further, and now I felt like I couldn't stand next to these people, the people that I thought I might grow close to. They were gone. Forever. Thank you for listening in. Have a wonderful day.